Exactly, and that's important, especially in events that you do, because you're a distance swimmer. And for a lot of people, they might go to meet, they might think like a 50 or like 100 is like exciting. They might look at like a miler like you and see like 14, 15 minutes and say, how's that exciting to watch? And it's truly awesome that they not only think that's exciting, but like, how did you become a distance swimmer? Was it something that like they just kind of put you in and you end up just turning out to be really good? Is it something that they put you in and you enjoyed and you started getting good a little bit later on? Like, why would I don't want to say why would someone choose distance, but it's almost like how did you end up distance and why did you end up distance?
Yeah, so I started out kind of as a IM butterflyer more. Like I do the 4 IM, I do the two flies, I do the two frees sometimes. Didn't really get up into those long races, right, until I was about 11 or 12. But, as I started going to more and more, better competitions and racing better competition, I realized one, you know, there's levels to this swim thing. I always thought I was a, okay swimmer, right? But then I'd go to like states or junior Olympics or whatever in
Yeah.
Michigan, and these kids would be huge and they'd be fast and they'd beat you by like 10 seconds in a 100 or 200 fly. And at that point you realize, wow, like, there's still a long ways to go before you can really like, get to that level.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as I got to about 12, 13, 14, that was kind of the moment where my coach put me in the mile for the first time. And I swam it pretty good for, 12 and 13. I don't think I went like 18, 19 minutes, but
Okay.
it was the way I swam it and the way I paced it. He was like, I think that was for the first moment he was like, we might have something in distance here. And so I believe it was the summer before my freshman year. My coach sat me down during August, like it was August, a couple weeks before the season, and he was like, "Look, we think you have a future in distance swimming." He's like, "We think you have the capacity to do it. We think you have the pace, the stroke." He's like, "I think that's where you're going to really start to find, your niche in swimming and where you're going to excel." He's like, "It's going to take a lot of training though." And so I went on this program where I was, mornings doubles was, before and after school.
Yeah.
Mornings we just pump out the aerobic yards. I mean, it was probably about 7 or 8 different sets, and I don't
Okay.
think any of them were below like a 400 in terms of distance. It was either 12 fours, 10 fives, 8 sixes, 6 800s, 5 1000s,
Yeah.
3 miles off the block. And I mean, this was all school year. We were doing this stuff. And obviously, you're getting to high school, you start to grow a little bit and develop. And so I grew a few inches. I think I went from about 5'1" or 5 foot to about 5'4", 5'5", and I think that played a big role in my time drops. So I had went to nationals my eighth grade year, that spring before this
Okay.
whole meeting, and I was a little bit sick, but I had started swimming those, events. I swam them okay, right, and it was a good start. It was a good baseline, but I knew I had more in me. And
Yeah.
so we go through this training regimen, and it's hard. I mean,
Oh
but
yeah.
I definitely found like the true distance grind at that point in my life and in my career. And we get to the spring, and I go to that same meet, and it's the NCSA age group meet down in Orlando. And I end up, I believe, dropping from the year before, I dropped 20 seconds in the 500, like a minute and 8 seconds in the mile. I actually ended up winning the mile too there.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and I mean the time it was a pretty good time. I mean comparatively when you compared it in the age range, and so at that point I was like, okay, there's something here,
Yeah.
and you got to build on it and learn and start to figure out kind of where it's going to take you from here. And I think as I got older and older, where I grew a couple more inches, but I didn't grow as much as I thought I would. I
Yeah.
ended up only being about, 5'7", maybe 5'7".
Okay.
And obviously you're never gonna, compete with the guys in the 200s and the even, the 400s really. It's you kind of you see like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm stuck kind of in this position where it's going to be distance or nothing if I want to
Exactly.
really, break through for college. And that's where I knew I was going to make, make my money per se, once I got to college. And so, I grinded out through high school and that distance training and, slowly improved. And there were some, some good times and there were some definitely tough times in there where you hit the stagnation and you struggle to drop time. But, I finally, that my junior year, that's a story I think we can get into probably down, a little bit later. But my junior year, I finally saw that breakthrough that I needed for, recruiting. And coaches were finally like, I starting to get those looks. And the coaches were like, we think you can be a good piece on our team. We like the way your times dropped. And so, that's kind of where the distance carried me. And here I am now, still grinding out the distance yards. I found a home and I found kind of my role per se on a college swim team.
Yeah, because everyone has a role, right? Like everyone has a specific set of skills. Everyone has a specific like events that they do. Like sprinters are going to obviously do the sprint events. You have some IMers that are going to do the 2 IM, 4 IM, which is absolutely brutal. You have your distance swimmers that might do your 500, your 1,000 mile. Like everyone has a specific role, and you eventually found that role kind of towards it truly seems like the beginning of your freshman year, but you talked about kind of the training that you had, not doing anything less than a 400. Was there ever a time during that training that you remember where you're like, is this even like worth it? Like, do I even enjoy this? Like, is obviously it's not going to be fun like the whole time. You mentioned it, you're going to go through ups and downs, but like when you're doing that, like what made you want to continue to swim? Because some people might see that and just realize not only how physically difficult that is, which we'll obviously talk about, kind of the toll that swimming distance can take on you physically, but mentally, like that had to be insanely stressful and difficult as well because you mentioned earlier, you're looking down at a lane line and you're doing that for hours on end. Like it has to drive you a little bit crazy at some points.
Yeah, so I attribute a lot of that to just one, my general kind of relationship with the sport. I know for a lot of people as they get older and they get, more and more into their swimming careers, a lot of times it can be really difficult to make it through, especially when you get to the senior year of high school. That's always a tough one where you're, almost to college and, for some they just want to get to college and for some they're
Yeah.
just trying to make it through their senior year of swimming, and so you find those moments and I find, for me the senior year was of high school was really tough with the stresses of recruiting and trying to hit times and just, feeling like I was really in that stagnant kind of where the times just weren't dropping after a really good junior year and trying to, build back post COVID because we're just, we were coming out of COVID at this point. And so, we're just trying to get back on our feet in terms of regular training cycles again and getting used to that. And so I think there were a lot of times during that year where I was just like, man, like this is a tough, this is gonna it's almost more mentally challenging than the physical aspect, even when you talk about distance.
Yeah.
Like, for me it's distance, it's gonna be a lot of yards, it's gonna hurt physically and you're gonna be in that pool for a while and your arms are gonna be sore.
Absolutely.
But the whole other battle is, am I good enough? Am I doing the things I need to do, for recruiting? Is it going to be enough? You ask yourself these questions and that doubt starts to, trickle in and swimming, it's such a, mental sport that, you end up overthinking your races and just not performing to the level you need to, with those recruiting pressures on you. And so there was definitely, going into my championship season, my senior year, where I had gotten sick right before my two biggest meets, my high school state meet and our nationals.
Okay.
And so I had to make the decision to not swim my races at the high school meet to focus on the nationals and hopefully get healthy enough
Yeah.
for that meet because I knew it, with my recruiting goals and the times I needed to hit, I couldn't afford to not be in the best shape when I swam my first meet and then have nothing left for that second meet. I
Yeah.
knew I had to prioritize, what's going to give me the best chance, not just in this moment, but for the next 4 years. And
Absolutely.
so, going into that meet and just not knowing and having to take, days off that week leading up because I was sick. And, I mentally, I was in this whole headspace of, wow, like I have no clue what's going to happen here. And if this doesn't go the way I need it to, like I could be, recruiting wise, this could be a train wreck,
Yeah.
And so that moment I think was probably mentally the hardest for me throughout all of the swimming I've gone through, and the meet went okay, right? I swam my races. I went pretty close to my best times,
Okay.
but I didn't hit the times I needed to.
Yeah.
And so, getting on the phone with the college coaches after, I'm telling them, like, hey, I didn't hit these times, but here's the situation. I gave it what I had. I wasn't going to just back down from this and not give myself a chance to show you guys my, training and what my training has led up to. And even though it's not where I wanted to be, it's the mental toughness and fighting through the physicalities of distance swimming well, not at 100% because it's maximum like the sickness factor when you're not at 100% when you swim the mile or the 500, it's gonna show.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't fake the train. Unfortunately, you can't fake it, and so I just told them well the times aren't what I wanted. The mental aspects and what I've learned and how to mentally be tough. I feel like I've gotten more out of that than anything, and I feel like that's prepared me, to be a member of your team. And it was a waiting game. I had to wait, but luckily I ended up getting a spot here after that, and the rest is history.